and welcome to Pegasus Presents. Tonight we're going to be interviewing a very interesting individual who currently is a UFO researcher and an eyewitness to an intriguing incident which he has reproduced in detail in video. One of those is my first UFO sighting, alien craft over my city, and the other is Night in the Desert. He's knowledgeable on subjects ranging from propulsion to Bob Lazar. He also has a nice bio there that you can read and update yourself a little bit with particulars of this individual. And I can tell you right now, this is one interesting guy. And I'd like to introduce you now to A51 Watcher. Hello, how are you?
Hi,
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Good to be with you.
Thank you for the rest of that. Yeah. Now it says that you became an avid researcher and videographer, especially from what 1965 when you had your first UFO sighting.
Right, that was a pretty astounding sighting. And if you go to thelivingmoon.com and go to the Pegasus forum, you can see that video and everything else that we'll be discussing tonight.
I feel really fortunate to be the first person to interview you on these topics because, as far as I can tell, just based on my research of you particularly, you are your information is astounding. In the field of ufology, I would say you're right up there with the greats. And I'm surprised that no one else has been banging down your door to get information from you, especially as the topic relates to Area 51 and Bob Lazar. Those two areas you seem to have a lot of really intriguing information on.
Yeah, thanks. I've had a few interesting moments in my career as a researcher, and Area 51 was definitely one of them. I was fortunate enough to get a copy of the news broadcast from Nevada when George Knapp broadcast the Bob Lazar story, and that inspired me to go down and take a visit for myself and take a look around. I was just going to say I got lucky and managed to arrive right in the middle of one of the tests of the alien craft out there at Area 51.
That's amazing. Also, I was going to say that for people who don't know very much about ufology or the study of ufology, could you explain in more detail who was George Knapp and how does he relate to the story?
George Knapp is a newsman on Nevada news station KLAS, and he broadcast the Bob Lazar story concerning Area 51 on one of his news broadcasts.
Okay, and what did he talk about in the broadcast that you found especially captivating?
That there was a young scientist there that has become a whistleblower, explaining that we were testing alien craft there down in Nevada, and that you could view these tests from public land.
You could view the test from where?
Public land.
Public land. Okay, and who was this individual?
This individual was Bob Lazar,
And who was Bob Lazar?
a young scientist that had worked at Area 51 where they kept alien craft stored, and he worked on a program to back engineer this alien technology.
Do you know what the name of the program was he worked on?
No, not the name of the program, but the area that he worked at was called S4 or Site 4.
Okay, now the areas out there were all numbered, I take it, in Area 51?
They all had different names or numbers for identification. It's just like inside of Area 51, you have the Groom Lake facility, and you also have the S4 facility.
And now where exactly is Groom Lake located, or actually Area 51?
Well, Area 51 encompasses a large area in the Nevada desert between Rachel and Las Vegas, if you want to look it up on the map.
Okay, so what would you say is a large area? 100 square miles? Less? More?
More than that. It's hundreds of square miles.
Oh my goodness. And what would they need such a large area for? Don't they have it fenced in and stuff?
No, it's not fenced in. There are warning signs and boundary markers out there,
Warning
warning you,
signs.
warning signs warning you that you're approaching a military facility and you're not supposed to photograph the area. And if you do trespass, that use of deadly force is authorized.
Now, that would be my first question then, use of deadly force. Don't most military installations have such similar signs? You're not allowed to photograph or trespass or use of deadly force is authorized?
They don't have those signs. At most, you will see a warning that you're approaching a military facility, no trespassing. You don't see the level of severity that you do on the Area 51 signs about no photography and use of deadly force.
So, where did they get you're saying you've had sightings out there, right? At Area 51? Yourself
That's
personally?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
What's your theory on where that spacecraft came from that you were seeing? I mean, it is like spacecraft, like flying saucer type technology, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's the shape of the craft looks as Bob described to be this classic sports model, which is an elliptically shaped craft or classic flying saucer, and they perform amazing maneuvers and speeds, going thousands of miles an hour and cutting 90-degree corners without slowing down.
I believe I saw one of your videos that you produced regarding, or it was on your YouTube channel regarding one of the sightings somebody filmed out there called Neat Tricks. And I thought, Neat Trick 1, I think it was called. Is that on your particular channel?
Yeah, I filmed that. That's on my channel, and you can see that video through Pegasus. The link is up there.
Okay. And that is, again, the Pegasus forum, right? At thelivingmoon.com/forum. And just
Forum
go,
one,
eh,
Forum one,
oh, forum
actually.
one. Yeah, that's right. Thelivingmoon.com/forum one. The number one, that is. And sign up if you want to learn more on the subject and read more on the story. You can go there and sign up to be a member. What I found particularly interesting about the video was you could see how the craft was moving towards the camera's eye and then like jumping a certain, who knows, an unknown distance, and then jumping back and then jumping over again and then jumping back, and like it was, I mean, you could see the entire process like it was testing how that particular maneuver worked.
A pretty neat trick, huh?
It is. I wonder if they could do that for larger distances, not just those small little jumps.
Yeah, I've personally witnessed them do longer jumps. It's pretty incredible to see.
What is a longer jump?
Like a mile or two.
Oh my goodness. So they just started at one point and you were able to film it?
Well, I explained in one of the threads on Pegasus that it's pretty tough to film jumps that far
Yeah, I would
because
imagine.
because it's hovering in one place and it disappears and then reappears in another place, and you try and move your camera over to where it is now, and by the time you get over there it's jumped to a new place, so it gets pretty impossible to try and follow it around. So you end up trying to keep your camera in the central location where they start off their maneuvers and return to, and try and film them in that location.
Oh my goodness. So what now? I think I asked this question a minute ago. I'd really like your answer on this. Where do you think, or do you have evidence that this technology came from?
Well, you have to go with the information from the person that directed you to be able to witness these tests in the first place. And the only person I know of who has inside information about what happens at this area is Bob Lazar, because certainly nobody else is talking. And who else are you going to believe?
Okay, so you have eyewitness evidence that it's been happening, and the person who directed you to collect this eyewitness uh, footage, because you've got it filmed and it's on your video channel, is Bob Lazar, who worked there.
That's
And
right.
okay, now where did he, besides his time working there, where did he actually have any other evidence of his own, like his own, let's say, more corroborating evidence that would make his story more believable for you personally?
Well, that was shown in the news special George Knapp showed, and that corroborating evidence was video footage that he took of the tests of the craft out there while he was taking friends out there and showing them the tests. He went out there on 3 separate occasions and let friends see the craft, and he also videotaped the craft. And that's another interesting piece of corroboration is his video footage looks almost exactly like mine. It's almost identical, the way that it strobes and shimmers around in the night sky.
The shimmer part, all right, what is the shimmering caused by? Is it just like a star shimmering or what?
No, it's caused by the shape changing radically every frame in the video. It changes from one shape to another.
Okay, now I witnessed that in your video about, well, not only my first UFO sighting, but some of the other videos I watched of yours where it shows the craft constantly changing shape, and it's amazing how many times and how many different configurations it has. What is it doing?
Well, that's because it's surrounded by a distortion field, which is caused by amplified gravity.
Okay, for people who don't know what a distortion field or amplified gravity is, could you kind of explain that in a little more detail?
Well, when you amplify gravity, it creates a distortion field. It actually warps space and time wherever there's amplified gravity. And so, whatever object you're trying to look at, you're looking at through a shimmering distortion field, which distorts the image that you're looking at.
Okay, so let me see if I understand this completely. What you're basically saying is that if we were to take the normal gravity of Earth and increase it or decrease it, it would change the way we saw it. If we had a camera above looking down at the Earth, it would change the way it looked.
In essence, that's correct. Technically, you're off a little bit because we're not increasing the Earth's gravity. We're increasing atomic gravity
Okay.
because there's two types of gravity. There's gravity A, which is the strong force, and gravity B, which is the weak force.
Oh, okay.
And that's what we use for propulsion is by amplifying the gravity A wave.
Okay, okay. Or at least that's what the craft are doing, is what you're saying.
The technology of the craft is amplifying the gravity A wave,
Okay, now
which,
you said we. Who is we? You just mean humans, right?
well, yes, we who possess this technology, that's what we are doing. Whether it's humans or aliens, that's the method of propulsion that we are using.
Or the way you say that, it makes it sound like you're from Alpha Centauri or something and you're using that technology. Okay, so um, we're amplifying gravity to do what? What other than creating a distortion field? What else does it do? I mean, is it just there to camouflage it, or I mean, what's the point of the distortion field? The strong force is
It's
to
just
make.
it's a natural byproduct of your propulsion field.
Okay. And so that means that the craft that display the distortion field are actually more powerful than say a jet airplane.
Yeah, that's correct. If you're using gravity amplification for propulsion, your level of sophistication is way beyond anything that we're doing.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. So how does this all tie into, let's say, the rest of ufology and Roswell, the Roswell incident, and things of that nature?
Well, the maneuvers these craft display is speeds at thousands of miles an hour and cutting right angle turns without slowing down. And that's defies the laws of physics and aeronautics. Your craft would be torn to shreds and your pilots would be smashed going that fast and making that sharp a turn. It's just physically impossible to do. But when you see craft that are able to do this before your eyes, you realize that somebody has figured out the answer to the problems that we still currently have in earthly technology. So this technology, wherever it comes from, regardless, is thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us.
Oh, but we're using it.
We're using it because we've got a hold of somebody else's property.
And how did we do that?
That's a good question. We don't really know. We can only imagine that the Roswell crash provided our first sample of this technology.
Okay,
But
and
according to Bob Lazar, we have a total of 9 of these craft in our possession.
9 of them. And is it,
Right.
did we catch them all, or did we create new ones from the original?
As far as he knows, these are recovered or retrieved craft, not something that we built, because they have child-sized seats in them.
Child-sized seats. So this suggests that I would assume, extraterrestrials were piloting the craft were inside of them, literally piloting them, and not like a robot or.
That's correct. They had living beings in them piloting them.
Okay, living beings. So would you suggest that the living beings that are very small, that were piloting these things, would maybe be described as a gray extraterrestrial, or what kind of terrestrial extraterrestrials are we talking about here?
Well, in the briefings that he read while he worked there, he saw alien autopsies of small grays and mentioned that they come from Zeta Reticuli, and that's where these craft come from.
Okay, where is Zeta Reticuli?
Way out there.
We don't know.
uh,
We don't know. Like, is it from the Orion system or?
my answer is going to take longer than the minute or so we have left, so why don't we get back to that exact question after these messages?
Welcome to thelivingmoon.com. Here you'll find many interesting topics presented by the best in their fields. Starting off with the owner, Zorgon, who runs the place. Follow the Honorable John Lear in his discussions as he ventures into the depths of our nearest neighbor's secrets, including his own set of alternative theories that the moon has an atmosphere and more gravity than expected. If you wish to step into one of the best forums on the planet, enter the Pegasus Research Consortium, where you might lose yourself in many a rabbit hole. Dig deep into moon and Martian anomalies. Follow the live LRO tracking system. Enter the Members Hall of Fame and discover stargates, scientific research, radio and video interviews of John Lear, future technologies, the wisdom of the ancients, image analysis work, study of the moon's bases and orbital craft. Continue with a tour through the electronic universe and anti-gravity studies of all kinds, and a huge collection of UFO studies past and present. And this is just a teaser. www.thelivingmoon.com is the place to do research on so many subjects it's hard to list them all. Don't forget to sign up. Membership is free, and all the good stuff is behind the membership curtain.
And we're back with A51, talking about some very interesting extraterrestrial UFO high technology and all the implications thereof. Well, you don't know, like, is it from the Orion system or?
No, it's not in the Orion system. Actually, if there's a thread about the Zeta Reticuli system and a video created by one of our members called Anthra, which goes into a detailed explanation of that entire system and where it's located. So you should give that a look if you have a question about that.
Yeah, I think I will. Okay, so anyway, we have recovered 9 of these. Where did the first one show up? Was it at Roswell?
We don't have official information on that from S4, but I would certainly guess that the first one came from Roswell.
Do you think that there's anything, let's say, slightly strange about this entire thing? Like, for example, some people might look at the incident and think it sounds like it's contrived. Like maybe they let it out in little pieces and little bits to us and then gave it kind of a plausible deniability so that we're not sure if it's real or not.
I would say there's been a disinformation campaign all along, and whatever they put out has been carefully planned all along, how much and when.
And you would say all along since when? Since the Roswell incident or before that?
Since the Roswell incident.
Okay, since the Roswell incident.
It doesn't appear that there was a cover-up program in place before Roswell, and then suddenly there was.
And what evidence do we have that there was a cover-up plan in place after Roswell?
All the military individuals that were involved with that incident have said as much, either while they were alive or in deathbed statements that were released after they died.
How many are we talking? How many military personnel that were involved had deathbed testimonies and things of that nature?
At least a half a dozen I know of.
And they were all originally at Roswell?
Right. They refused to talk until after they died.
Or after they were about to die?
Right.
Because you wouldn't say, oh, I see what you're saying. They pre-recorded these interviews, these deathbed statements, and then they were played after they passed?
They actually signed written affidavits. The press officer that released the famous press release that Army captures flying saucer wrote up an affidavit to be released upon his death.
Yeah.
Explaining that he was allowed to see the crash saucer and the bodies, but was sworn to secrecy.
Okay, now we're going to get into
this. He was involved in the whole cover-up, actually. It was a pre-planned cover-up.
Okay.
Straight from the Pentagon.
I would really like to touch on briefly, or as long as you'd like to discuss it, your first UFO sighting. Are you ready to talk about that?
Sure.
Okay. And now it's 1965. How old are you?
I'm really young. I'm a young lad.
How old were you when it happened?
I believe I was about 11 years old.
Okay, you were 11 years old, and you lived where?
In Portland, Oregon.
In Portland, Oregon. And what happened? Like, just spill the beans. What did you see? How lead up the events? Tell the story of what happened before the sighting and then the sighting itself.
Well, once again, this video is available on Pegasus in one of my threads. And I was stargazing with a friend and was watching the night sky and the various constellations. And 3 stars that were in a triangle gradually became larger and redder in color. And gradually, after about a 5-minute period, they were now a red triangle as opposed to white stars that they had been originally. And myself and my friend both noticed them. And they started spinning around in the night sky, zipping in and out of each other in an odd sort of pattern. And that really caught our attention. And then a 4th craft came zipping out of that swirling formation and started doing extreme speeds and 90-degree turns in the skies over Portland. And we were pretty shocked.
I saw the video footage of, that you created.
Yeah.
That was absolutely brilliant of the event as it was unfolding. And I noticed that in one of the maneuvers they performed, they did this like almost a stair-step design in the sky.
Right. And they also did a pyramid formation in the sky. a triangle.
One craft was doing that, or did they all start forming that, design them together as a group?
No, that one craft that took off from the group that was
Uh-huh.
flying around it on its own started doing that pyramid design.
Okay. So after you saw this, what was your reaction?
We were pretty stunned and also pretty terrified. We thought the invasion from Mars was on, and we started sneaking up to his parents' house to wake them up and alert them to what was going on. But we were trying to do it very carefully because we had the impression that we were being watched because they were doing all this directly overhead of us. And we thought that there might be some connection to us.
Okay, now this would be the big glaring question here. What do you believe you were witnessing? Were those humans applying some of the nine advanced craft, or extraterrestrials?
No, the the odd formation that they performed that you saw in the video where they're just flying around each other. I've never seen or heard of humans ever doing that.
Okay.
So I suspected then and I suspect now that that was ETs flying their own craft for whatever unknown purpose. I doubt that if it was humans flying it, they would do it directly over a large city like Portland.
Oh, you have a point there. You have a point. So, what kind of a psychological impact did that have on you as a child?
uh, well, as I said, we were trying to be pretty stealthy, sneaking up to his house to knock on the door because we thought we'd get zapped if they saw us sneaking up there to rat them out. And by the time we finally got up there to knock on the door, all the craft disappeared and took off. And all we had left to show anybody was just the night sky. And we thought it best not to wake them up and show them an empty night sky, so we just crept back to our sleeping places and didn't say anything.
Okay, now in the footage that you provided, I know that this wasn't an actual film, as far as actual live footage. You did provide, however, your own, very well done, in, I guess, what would I call that? Your own animation of the event, including the original pattern, how it turned red, how it broke up and not broke up, but split off into pieces that started swirling around each other, and how one of them broke off and started doing maneuvers. And then after that, I noticed one very fast craft came in from the right hand side of the screen and went by so fast you almost miss it. And then, and the minute that happened, they all shot off as if they were saying, oh, here come the cops, we got to behave. That's what it
Yeah,
reminded me of.
that's what happened.
That's exactly how it looked, huh?
Right.
That is amazing. That it really is an amazing. It has like a whole story all on its own. Just watching the footage, I mean the animation that you created. That was to impact the rest of your life, I would assume.
Right. We went back to our sleeping bags and we were afraid to go to sleep. We didn't know if they were going to return. We were kind of full of adrenaline, a little too much to go back to sleep. And we started wondering who we could tell about this and who among our friends or associates we could tell. And we realized unless you were there and saw it yourself, you wouldn't believe it. So there was nobody we could tell. But the impact it had on me is I began researching any UFO case that came along in the newspaper, magazines, books, TV. I would definitely give it a close listen and investigate it more.
No doubt. So you became like a sci-fi fan after that, I imagine.
Oh, sure, I would always give sci-fi a look and a listen, but I was more interested in science fact, not science fiction.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. In the one of the things I envisioned when you were telling your story was George McFly, And you know that scene where Marty comes in and puts the headset on him with the blasting music and says he's Darth Vader?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that because some people I know, and I brought that up for this reason, some people really believe that all abductions, all UFOs are all human. That it's all been human beings doing it the whole time, the abductions and everything. Do you agree with that assumption, or are you saying basically that you believe Bob Lazar has provided enough evidence for you to suggest that these are not all human based events, that there are some that are definitely extraterrestrial?
No, I don't think Bob Lazar provides any proof on that. People like Bud Hopkins and Dr. David Jacobs provide proof on that.
Now, who are they?
They are the people that have written books about abductions, and they have testimony from literally thousands of people that have been abducted by aliens.
Okay. And do they have also, like, do these things have, like, some characteristics that follow a certain pattern, like the scoop marks thing? And
Right.
right. Okay, and the scoop marks is just for the audience members who don't know about this. The scoop marks are apparently appear on the bodies of people who have been abducted, where they claim that samples of their tissue has actually been taken for whatever reason by the during the abduction account.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. Um, what's your personal view on that? The whole abduction scenario phenomena. What do you think
I
they're up
think
to?
I think enough evidence has been presented to where I believe these abductions are taking place by ET, and the ultimate goal of the abduction experience appears to be creating a hybrid race, half human, half alien.
And now, just theoretically, from the position of a person who appreciates science, what reason would they have to create hybrids?
Well, that's the $1 million question, because obviously they have a set goal of how many hybrids they want, be it whether it be 5,000, 5 million, whatever, who knows. But when they reach their target goal, what is going to be done with this new population? Are they going to load this new population of hybrids up on spaceships and fly away somewhere to some other planet and live happily ever after? Or are they planning on staying on this planet? And if they stay, what will be their role? Are they going to mingle with us and live happily ever after? Or are they going to take over and rule us and live happily ever after?
Okay, now my question would be on the whole hybrid thing. If they're here with us, wouldn't we recognize that they're not exactly human beings?
That sounds fair. I don't understand
You don't
where
understand the
you go.
question? Okay,
Right.
okay, if they're here right now, walking amongst our population, wouldn't we notice them and say, that is not a human being?
I don't think they walk among our population. They seem to come at night in the middle of the night and grab you like fish out of the stream and tag you and do whatever procedures they have and then slip you back into the stream.
I'm talking about the hybrids themselves, though. How are they
Oh,
living amongst us without us noticing?
I don't think they are, or we would be noticing them.
That's what I thought. Okay, so where are they living?
Perhaps underground, perhaps underwater, perhaps a base on the moon. I don't know where they're keeping this hybrid race.
Oh, that's interesting. That is really interesting. I know that there's a lot of references down through history of events like this, like the biblical Nephilim and things of that nature. So it's not too far out of human consciousness, anyway, that these kinds of events are possible historically. It's just that the last time this happened, things didn't go so well. So I'm hoping that that isn't going to be the case again.
In briefing documents Bob Lazar read at S4, they state the aliens state that they began performing genetic upgrades on the pre-existing simians here, and actually performed a total of 63 genetic upgrades over a period of thousands of years, and which gradually resulted in what we know as a human being.
So, do you think they're using us like DNA banks or something to upgrade their or to maintain their own bodies?
It's up for anybody's guess, but that certainly sounds similar to, in the documents, they refer to us as containers, but they don't say containers of what.
Oh my goodness gracious, yes, that is interesting. I know that when I was studying ancient texts, I noticed in the Sumerian texts that the word for, actually a Sumerian dictionary, the Pennsylvania State University Sumerian dictionary, it says that the meaning of Adam is house. That sounds like a container, doesn't it?
Yeah, they also said that religion was given us to stop the containers from damaging each other.
That's good. I appreciate that one. Okay, now, so let's get back to
They
your.
also
Okay.
they also provided us with a crystal that shows moving images, and they also told us that they had a hand in creating Jesus, or they were directly responsible for creating Jesus. And they provided us a crystal that has images that contains this proof.
Now, who said this?
The aliens.
To who though?
This is in the documentation out at Site 4
Okay, from Bob Lazar.
from Bob Lazar.
Okay, he says that that Jesus, in other words, they're trying to say Jesus never existed, that they just created him for the purpose of keeping us under control.
Well, if you put two and two together like that, I guess you could say that.
That is fascinating. The reason I say that is because if you've read the Sumerian texts, a lot of times I notice little hints here and there that make it sound like the Sumerian Enki was the same guy as Jesus, like several thousand years later. And so that, the idea that they created him, maybe you could take that more than one way. If you go all the way back to like thousands and thousands of years ago, who knows? Because our history doesn't stretch back that far, our written history that we're allowed to see anyway. All right, we'll be right back after a few messages.
Welcome to thelivingmoon.com. Here you'll find many interesting topics presented by the best in their fields. Starting off with the owner, Zorgon, who runs the place. Follow the Honorable John Lear in his discussions as he ventures into the depths of our nearest neighbor's secrets, including his own set of alternative theories that the moon has an atmosphere and more gravity than expected. If you wish to step into one of the best forums on the planet, enter the Pegasus Research Consortium, where you might lose yourself in many a rabbit hole. Dig deep into moon and Martian anomalies. Follow the live LRO tracking system. Enter the Members Hall of Fame and discover stargates, scientific research, radio and video interviews of John Lear, future technologies, the wisdom of the ancients, image analysis work, study of the moon's bases and orbital craft. Continue with a tour through the electronic universe and anti-gravity studies of all kinds, and a huge collection of UFO studies past and present. And this is just a teaser. www.thelivingmoon.com is the place to do research on so many subjects it's hard to list them all. Don't forget to sign up. Membership is free, and all the good stuff is behind the membership curtain.
And we're back with A51, talking about some very interesting extraterrestrial UFO, high technology, and all the implications thereof. Now, I noticed from your story about your first UFO sighting that it did impact your life. You went on and became a real, not just a UFO watcher, researcher, but also a fan of science. I guess primarily because you're trying to figure out how these things work.
Right.
And I think that that would, it's sort of like backward engineering to say, let's go back to what happened at Roswell so that we can find out what exactly led to the moment where you saw these things. Because if they're crashing on our planet and we're retrieving their lost craft, why aren't they retrieving them themselves? Just like in Roswell, did they come to try to retrieve their own craft?
No, and I would think that if there were living beings, they might consider coming on a rescue flight. But if there are not any living beings, I don't know if they would even have means to fly it out of there. You presumably would need a full crew to fly it out of there.
What would be a full crew? How many seats did Lazar see inside one?
I believe there were 3 seats in there, as I recall.
Okay, 3 seats. Okay. So, 9 craft, each with 3 seats, correct?
I don't know that he got to see inside the other 8 craft. The only one he got to see inside, I believe, was the sports model, the one that he was assigned to.
Okay, now that is another area. Let's talk for a moment about the different models, since he called one the sports model. You mean there are different shapes?
Right, he said they have the assortment pack. He gave them all nicknames, like one was the Jello mold, and another one was the top hat, and another one was the sports model.
Okay, the Jello mold. Now this is starting to remind me of one of the UFO researchers that had one he called the wedding cake. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Billy Meyer
Yeah.
is responsible for that one.
Do you believe that Billy Meyer was seeing real UFOs, and do you believe his footage or drawings of UFOs was legit?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And I've created a thread with all the evidence showing why I think he faked the photos and the everything.
But why would he do that?
To get money, I would imagine.
Okay, or was it a misinformation or disinformation strategy?
I think he was playing around with trick photography and false perspective ever since his college days. Actually, is when his first black and white primitive UFO photograph, first one I've ever seen, and people found it interesting, and he continued in that line of work and gradually got better and better, learning how to make realistic looking UFO photographs and later movie footage.
Well, that was what my take on it was as well. So the Venusian, the woman from Venus that he was introducing, was also probably.
Well, she turned out it took a while, because back in those days, TV shows were just shown on the air once, and that was it. They were never shown again, and videotapes were not available of them. YouTube was not available. You couldn't download it, so it would just appear on the air once, and then it would disappear. Billy apparently photographed some of those shows, and one of them was the Dean Martin show. And one of the Dean Martin girls he used in his photographs and claimed that she was one of the Venusian ladies.
Have you seen the newspaper clipping, or I presume it was a newspaper clipping, of a pair of Venusians, a male and a female, in a room full of people?
Yeah.
What was that?
I believe that's another one of the fake headlines and stories that got passed around in the early days. Just more of the disinformation.
One of them was actually called Thor, I remember that.
Yeah, Valiant Thor, I believe it was.
Yeah, Valiant Thor. Yep, that was his name.
And supposedly he had some high-level government pass that would allow him to go places, but I don't know anybody that's ever seen the pass or researched it or verified it.
Okay. So, there is a whole section that's commonly called ufology that's actually an elaborate attempt at earning money, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And in its own way, because as technology evolves, we start finding ways to realize, or actually technology to uncover the fakery. In its own way, it becomes a form of disinformation because now the skeptic can point at it and say, um, "What are you, one of those people believing Billy Meyer?"
Right.
Yeah. Now, I bet I've encountered that same problem when studying ancient history, especially the Sumerian texts. Most people, when you say the word Sumer, think you're talking about Zachariah Sitchin, and although his work is just absolutely fascinating, he did not write the Sumerian text. This,
Right.
so that's the same problem you have here. It's like a case of the more data that's added that's not actually uh, real, the more chances are you're going to have people saying, well, this is just some elaborate hoax like religion or something of that nature, where they just want to show uh, how it was a money making enterprise and nothing else. And so people who believe that.
It's actually a combination of all three. People trying to make money, and people wanting their 15 minutes of fame,
Okay, okay.
and also the government putting out disinformation.
Well, just based on all of my research of you personally, and I've seen all your videos, I've read all your accounts, and I've kind of studied your basic entire life being consumed by the study of science and the research on UFOs, that you're probably one of the most um deserving of 15 minutes of fame that I've encountered just sitting around on the internet talking about it. I'm like, this guy has got, I mean, you're like a walking UFO encyclopedia. And you know so much about so many topics in this field and have so much evidence that I'm surprised that no one has interviewed you before me.
Yeah, I've kept a pretty low profile.
Now, there must be a reason for that. And I do believe you kind of clued me into that at one point, that some of your friends in that same category have met grisly demises.
Well, primarily it's because of the heavy-handed manner that security treated Bob Lazar before and after he went public, and the lengths they're willing to go to. I've learned to be careful, and a fellow named Ron Rummel and Phil Schneider both went down to Area 51, and not long after they came back, they wound up dead. So I decided I'd better keep a low profile myself.
So, what made you decide to come out and explain your experiences for other people to hear?
Well, I'm not getting any younger, and I guess it's time to let the information out for people to see.
Well, I wait till.
I've been I've been trying to tell people for a long time that yes, Bob Lazar is telling the truth, but in recent years, since I've seen the recover up of Area 51 be so successful, I've decided to step up and counter that claim and say, "Excuse me, I've got proof otherwise."
Right, right. Um, well, I think the story of how they absolutely character assassinated Bob Lazar is pretty much uh, really good corroborating evidence that the people that start talking about stuff that they don't want them talking about can end up having their entire personal life spit on, stomped on, and kicked to the side.
And erased.
Oh, and erased. Well, give me an example of the erased part.
All right, he said that he worked at EG&G.
Bob Lazar, you mean?
Right.
Okay.
And when George Knapp was investigating his history and education, he contacted EG&G, and they said, "No, we have no record of him." And when George Knapp went out to EG&G, he actually went through the phone book on one of the desks out there and discovered Robert Lazar listed right on next to the other scientists. When he confronted the manager there with his own phone book, the guy got flustered and still had no comment and said he still had no record of Bob Lazar. But one time we got lucky and they didn't think to remove the phone books. They got busted lying.
Aha! I remember reading a little bit on that. Then they also had something to do with his social security number.
Yeah, they got, he finally got a W-2 from them saying that he was hired by the Department of Naval Intelligence to work out there. And the few people that tried to investigate that, even the IRS themselves ran up against a brick wall and were told that you don't have the clearance to know about that.
Now, how do we know that the IRS actually investigated that?
We have two different investigators on video telling the results of their investigation. I have it in one of my threads on Pegasus.
That's amazing. This thing goes so wide and so deep that it's mind-boggling how much effort and money must go into this entire project. How much manpower is involved.
Well, a total of, let's see, 5 other people besides Bob Lazar corroborate him and said that yes, they drove out there with him and saw the test flights before he got caught on those 3 occasions, and that these crafts showed up right when and where he said they would.
Okay, and
So that's
out
going
of
to
those,
be that's going to be a pretty lucky guess on his part, right?
oh yeah, out of those 5 people, were one of them John Lear by any chance?
One of them was John Blair.
Yes. Now, John Lear, for the audience, for anyone who doesn't know, was the son of the guy who created the Lear jet. He,
William Blair.
William Lear, Lear, sorry, and who was what branch of the service was he in? Was it the Army, the Navy, the Air Force? I can't remember.
Who are you speaking of?
John Lear.
John. I'm not sure what area of the service he was in.
Okay, well, he flew a lot of craft, a lot of top secret craft. He went
He
overseas.
flew he flew for the CIA for a while. That's one area of service you could call it.
And he knows a lot of astronauts and their wives and their children.
That's correct.
And the man has connections. Let's put it that way. Anyway, that so.
Well, just to demonstrate that, I actually have video of him appearing with George Knapp on one of his shows called On the Record, where George would have a guest. And before Bob Lazar even started working at Area 51, before anybody knew about it, he had John Lear on there as a guest. And John was talking about secret craft being tested out in the desert. So, in essence, talking about Area 51 before it was even revealed or even worked at by Bob Lazar. So, yes, John obviously does have some good connections.
Obviously. The other question I wanted to ask, well, actually, I have a lot of questions on this subject. When you were doing your research into the Roswell incident, what was the first thing that struck you that this must have been a real event, and as far as the ufology angle is concerned, that it wasn't just quote unquote a weather balloon?
When Jesse Marcel finally came forward in later years and said, I'm the guy on the front of that newspaper there being forced to pose with a weather balloon, and that was no weather balloon.
Okay,
That's
now
when
that
that's when I first became interested.
okay, now that is a good angle, and that's a good place to start on the subject of what happened at Roswell. Now, some of our audience, of course, already knows this in detail, and some people have probably only know about it briefly or not at all. So let's start at the very basic. What happened?
Well, what happened was basically a extraterrestrial craft and its occupants crashed in the desert of New Mexico, area of Roswell, which happened to be our only nuclear base at the time. The bombers there were nuclear equipped, and so were the fighters. And a lot of people, even though they've heard the word Roswell, or even if they're familiar with it, are not familiar with the fact that flying saucers were being seen for a good 6 months that year in 1947, starting in May and ending in September.
Just a personal note here, or something I want to interject. Did this coincide at any point in time with the Mars thing that was pulled off by that one famous actor, where he made people think that he was broadcasting a live incident of an alien invasion from Mars or something like that?
I think you believe you're referring to Alternative 3, which was an April Fool's show put on by the BBC. And
Was
a
that
lot of
this?
people a lot of people were fooled by it. That's correct. It was a show about going to Mars and finding life there.
Oh, no, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the one that was broadcast. I believe it was broadcast from New York, and it was hosted by one of the famous actors, like the guy I think it was in Citizen Kane.
Oh, sure, you're talking about the War of the Worlds radio broadcast.
Yes, that is the one. Now, was that in the same time frame as those six sightings?
No, War of the Worlds was broadcast earlier.
Okay, about when? What time frame?
1938, I believe.
Okay, so right from already it had entered into the social conscience that there was a potential that there was life on other planets and that it was coming to the Earth. It just
Right.
it wasn't widespread, but it was already starting to enter the social conscience, maybe through the development of science fiction as a form of entertainment, or where do you think that
Yeah,
started? I mean, how did it get into our conversation? Was it as a result of ancient texts, as a result of sightings, as a result of the mainstream starting to interject
I
that
think
into the?
probably Orson Welles got the idea probably from a comic book and decided to turn it into a radio show.
That was the name. Yes, it was Orson Welles who starred. Yes, that was it. Um, okay, so that whole scenario led to a panic. People were behaving very uncharacteristically at the notion that there was an alien invasion happening in New York City. Correct? It was New York where this came from, right?
Right, and they thought they were listening to a live broadcast of it happening and then the aliens attacking.
Yeah, yeah. So people freaked out, and later on, I suspect that this information was used in that panel of judges who made the decision that we should not be, the public at large should not be informed about what's going on because we would panic and society would fall apart.
That's correct.
And what was the name of that panel?
Roberts Robertson panel.
The Robertson panel. And they had what had they done other than perhaps looked at the response from the War of the Worlds broadcast?
You'd have to look over the report. They gathered as much data as they could and backed it up as best they could because they did not want it released, and so they swayed the evidence in their favor.
Oh, I see. So it was actually perhaps done with prejudice.
To be continued in part 2.